Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us. My name is Karen Colson, and I am the Secretary for Women's Voices Raised for Social Justice, and I co-chair with Ellen Wentz our Kirkwood Attainable Housing Task Force. We've named that Kirkwood for Everyone. Women's Voices Raised is a grassroots organization. We have over 450 members in the St. Louis metro area. And we have education events the second Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. at the center of Clayton. And our next program is on October 12th, Fighting Efforts to Dehumanize and Erase LGBTQIA+ community. It should be a very interesting program. But now for today's program, which will be wonderful as well. Consumers Council of Missouri is a non-government, nonprofit organization focusing on building a more inclusive and equitable community of Missouri consumers, especially those with low to moderate income. Our speakers today are Sandra Padgett and Jacqueline Hutchinson. Sandra is an attorney who has represented school districts and other governmental agencies. She also has experience in social work. As the executive director of Consumers Council, she works in customer assistance programs for utilities and ensures banks meet the credit needs of the communities in which they do business. Some of her other Consumers Council responsibilities are managing grants, monitoring litigation, and leading community strategy. Jacqueline is the Director of Advocacy for Consumers Council and the former VP of Operations for People's Community Action Corporation of St. Louis. She is a renowned expert on how policies affect low-income Missourians. She has worked to build utility programs and educate legislatures and the public on the impact of laws, policies, and programs on low-income households. So for this, our Kirkwood for Everyone co-chair, Ellen Wentz, will be monitoring the chat box. Please put your questions there, and we hope to have a very good question and answer session at the end of the presentation or the program. And now I'm going to turn this over to our presenters.
Thank you very much. We're so happy to be here. This presentation came out of a few conversations that I had with Brenna and Karen and others from your organization. And in talking, we just decided that a lot of our goals are similar, although there's not a direct comparison, there's a lot of overlap. And so we thought that it would be good for consumers councils to come and tell you more about what we do. And I will say that I'm also a member of Women's Voices Raised for Social Justice, and I love the work that you all do. And I go to Holy Communion Church in University City, where your offices are. So I walk by your office pretty regularly. And Brenna and I have gotten to know each other, and we both being executive directors of smaller nonprofits and both having backgrounds as attorneys, have found that we have a lot in common and can support each other. So that's been really neat for me. So I'll just briefly introduce myself, and then I'll have Jackie introduce herself too, and then we'll go into a little bit more about Consumers Council, which will be the focus of our presentation. As Karen mentioned, my background is in law and social work. I worked until my 4 sons were between the ages of 2 and 8, and then I took a break from the paid workforce and did a lot of volunteer work, did a lot of board work. And with my husband's job, we moved to Los Angeles and to Arlington. And when I came back here, I was looking for something to do, and this was a really good fit. So I tell that story just because I know a lot of women have situations in their lives that may have enabled them or forced them to get out of the workforce. And And I am very fortunate that I was connected with Consumers Council and could jump back in. So, and I thank Jackie for having confidence in me that I could help her out. So that's a little bit about my background. Jackie, do you want to tell them a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, I am, as she said, Jackie Hutchinson. You don't have to call me Jacqueline. And so I worked in community action for more than 40 years. And my story of coming to this work is that I was a student at WashU and took a part-time temporary job working in the first utility assistance program, and just found out that people were freezing to death in their homes, and babies were being brought in with frostbite, and seniors were dying from the heat. And so I thought I would take a year and work for the Community Action Agency, and with my big fancy degree, I would solve all these problems in a year and then go on to do something else. Well, as it turned out, that there were so many policies, as I began to look at why is this happening. There are so many policies and procedures and barriers to low income families being able to access the help that they need, that I began to work on do policy work and work on how do we change the policies in this community and in this state that allow conditions like this to exist. And so a lot of that work was around access to utilities and equitable access for low income folk and for people living with disabilities and those kind of things. So over the last 40 some odd years, I have both worked on intervening in rate cases, but also worked collaboratively with the utilities to make sure that that all people have access to the necessary utilities for health and safety. So that's sort of my story. Yeah.
And Jackie really is the expert in this area. So you will see me deferring to her a lot during this presentation. But I'm curious how many and I know we have some who aren't on camera, but how many of you are familiar with Consumers Council? Have heard of us?
Now.
Yes, I know I've talked to Ruth, and Ruth is friends with our board president too. Yeah, and I see Ann Ross also. Fantastic. So we were started in 1971 by two women who lived in the Clayton area, Alberta Slavin and Joyce Armstrong, who many of you may know. And Alberta, I describe as being kind of a plucky person and also interested in economic justice for the greater St. Louis area. She and her friends realized that grocery store prices in West County, the suburbs in the West County area, were lower than the grocery store prices in North City and North County. So they got their friends together and they went out with their notepads and they compared the prices. And then they went to the grocery stores and they said, hey, this just isn't right. And they were able to get them to change their method of pricing. So that was their first accomplishment. And then Alberta decided that she wanted to have her own phone, that she didn't want to use the phone that AT&T required her to use in her house. At that time, I don't see very many people maybe on this call who aren't familiar with landlines, but when Jackie and I did a presentation to some school children last week, and they're like, what are you talking about? And then when we said landline, they said, oh yeah, we've heard of that. And I don't know if you all know, but there's actually a telephone museum now, I think in St. Charles County. Can you believe that? A telephone museum? I mean, that's how much things have changed in the last 50 some odd years. But anyway, she had a landline and she wanted to use her own phone, which Jackie and I are pretty sure was a Swedish phone. And AT&T wouldn't allow her to do that. And so she fought until she realized, or until she was able to do that. and allowed to. And at that point in time, she got kind of ticked off at the utilities. And so utilities became her focus. And eventually our organization continued to evolve. And we were called the Utility Consumer Council at one point, and then we became Consumers Council of Missouri. So we have three areas that we focus on. And Jackie and I are going to spend most of our time talking about our utility work and our banking work. So in our utility work, we work to keep rates as low as possible. We advocate with collaborators. We don't do all of the work on our own. And then we also work to make sure that customer assistance programs are not only in existence, but we also work to expand and maintain those programs. And in our banking work, we work to make sure that bank branches are meeting the needs of the neighborhoods where they're located. What we found, and we'll explain a little bit more about this. I didn't know this until I started this position, but many times regional local banks, especially, are following the old redlining maps. They may have a branch in North City or North County, but they are making their loans to people who don't live in those areas. And you'll be happy to know we've had a lot of success with working with the banks, and we'll talk a little bit more about this or about that. So what I thought I'd describe a little bit, and please don't go to sleep on this because utility regulation is all about money, okay? So money is something that everybody should pay attention to. But so in the St. Louis area, and I'm assuming that most of the people on this call are in the greater St. Louis area, and we don't have anybody from Kansas City, but there are certain utilities that we have to buy services from. And you may live in Kirkwood, so you're getting it from the Kirkwood Electric Company. But those of us who don't live with a city provider are getting it from Ameren. So Ameren is an investor-owned monopoly. We don't have any choice. If we live in the Ameren service area, we have to get our electricity from Ameren. And Ameren has shareholders, and of course the shareholders want their company to make money. And whenever Ameren wants to increase their rates, they have to go to the Missouri Public Service Commission. All right, the Missouri Public Service Commission is part of the Missouri state government. They're composed of 6 people, and they get to decide whether the utilities get to raise their rates or not. And as you can imagine, there's a little bit of politics involved in that. So in addition to Ameren, Spire is also an investor-owned monopoly, and Missouri American Water is owned by American Water, which is again an investor-owned monopoly for our areas. And then we have Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District, and for those who live in the city, your water is provided by St. Louis City. So over the past year, Ameren has raised their rates by 7%. Spire has raised their rates by 5%. Missouri American Water has raised their rates by about 7%. Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District currently has a proposal that's been approved by their commission. They're basically a self-governed body it's approximately a 7.2% increase that's going to go into effect during fiscal years 2025 to 2028. So we're still advocating as much as we can to reduce that and also expand the customer assistance programs. And I'm not sure if you heard, but the city in less than 30 days approved an increase in their water rates of, it's going to be 44% in 1 year.
What?
And that's,
Yeah.
and that is going to be followed by an annual increase that matches the CPIU. And so that was really bothersome to us. There's no transparent process in the city where third parties can intervene and look at the books. And really give a lot of community feedback on something like that. It's the Board of Aldermen who makes the decision. And so we're not arguing that it's not justified. I mean, I think, most of us who see all the water breaks in the city would say it is justified, but we're arguing for a water rate increase that would match the needs of the city, match the needs of the cost of providing water. So that's a summary of where we get involved. And so, Jackie, do you want to talk a little bit about our current work, a little bit more about our current work?
Yeah. So how do we get involved is sort of what I'm going to talk about. One of the opportunities for us to get involved is when the utilities file a rate case. And so we have an attorney that works with us who is a utility expert. And just a second here. I'm sorry. I need to plug up my my computer. Sandy, talk for a second while I get my cord.
So we have an attorney. His name is John Kaufman, and he specializes in utility work. He also represents AARP in cases around the country, and he's really. We have such good people. I mean, between Jackie, who's an expert in the needs of the customers, and John, who specializes in utility consumer law, we have some really quality people in our organization. But when cases are at the Public Service Commission level, so for example, when Ameren or Spire or Missouri American Water, when they file a proposal for a rate increase, we file a motion to intervene. And for those non-attorneys, again, this is when people usually just start to kind of fall asleep. But what that means is that we file a motion saying, hey, we want to be a part of this case because we represent consumers who are low and moderate income. The Office of Public Counsel represents all consumers in the state, but we're the ones who are at the table saying, yeah, that's okay for most consumers, but the ones who are low and moderate income need more. All right, Jackie, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
And so the way we do that is we provide expert testimony, and I work on that expert witness testimony, and we present that to the Public Service Commission so that it is entered into the case. And once we've done that, this year we had to petition for in-person public hearings. So there's a public hearing process, and during the COVID, they switched it all to online public hearings. And we wanted to go back to a system where people could come in and testify. And so this is something that every utility user can participate in. You can show up at a public hearing. You can talk about how that rate increase is going to impact you or impact your community, and have that information entered into the record. One of the things that's most impactful is to have people who are actually impacted by a rate increase the most, the low-income families, to show up at those hearings and to make sure that they speak on how the rate increase will impact them. So one of the things that we have done over the last couple of years is we got a grant that allowed us to start community advisory committees. And we began to educate those in the community who were interested on how to come out and speak before the Public Service Commission, what you need to talk about in your testimony, and how to, feel comfortable. Just even knowing that, at the beginning of the hearing is an opportunity to ask questions, but it is not the on the record time for you to present your information so that it would be on record. And that has given us much more success. We, sitting in the room and listening to the impact that those rate increases would have, just changed the atmosphere with the Spire hearing. It was so powerful that even before all of the hearings were done, they were ready to enter into negotiations, as opposed to to have that go to any kind of trial hearing.
And it really, as Jackie said, it really does make a difference. Me being new to this, I really wasn't familiar with the process. And when the first Spire hearing started, it was were they scheduling those last summer, I think, right, Jackie?
Yes.
Right.
Mhm.
And so what they wanted to have, instead of public hearings where testimony would be taken on the record and that evidence would be used to make a decision, Spire wanted to have workshops.
Yeah.
Which would just be people coming and bringing their bills and Spire, working out their situations. And so we filed a motion to resume the in-person public hearings, and we did get those.
Yeah.
And in that case, we had one of our proposals was to increase the eligibility level for the programs to 300% of the federal poverty level. And I remember reading that and thinking, oh, gee, okay, well, that's kind of aggressive, but we'll go ahead and include it anyway. And as we had people testifying in the room, the whole atmosphere of the room changed, and we were able to get that adopted as a pilot program. So
yeah, so to that point, Sandy, one of the things that we do as we present the testimony is we come up with recommendations and recommendations on how they can better serve the populations, the vulnerable populations. And so that was one of our recommendations, but we recommended additional funding for programs like with Spire, it would be the Payment Partners Program. That's the program that assists families monetarily with paying their bills. With Ameren, it was the Keeping Current and Keeping Cool programs. And once those programs are established, so I've worked for year after year, because every time they come in for a rate increase, if nobody is there to say, we want these programs to continue and we want them to be funded, then they can just drop those programs. And so we are there every time they ask for a rate increase, saying that these programs for vulnerable populations must be increased, and here's the evidence of why they need to be increased or they must continue. And so, and then the backup from the community in providing that testimony. One of the things that was very powerful that it was not only people with very low incomes, but it was retired school teachers and retired state workers who are trying to live on that retirement budget and are finding themselves, just one prescription away from not being able to buy food, having to make the decision, do I buy enough food, or do I get this prescription filled, or do I pay my utility bill? And that population that is just a little bit above the poverty guideline is the population that we advocate for, because they're often not eligible for traditional LIHEAP assistance. And so to have those guidelines above that, so that if it's utility funded, that people who wouldn't be eligible for the federally funded programs are also able to participate is something that we've advocated for. We have partners, as Sandy said. We can't do all this work alone, And so we have the PUC, which is the UPC, Utility Protection Committee, which really started out of COVID, and they came together to work on a moratorium. And once that moratorium, well, we didn't achieve a moratorium for as long as we wanted, but we did achieve a moratorium. But we began to engage that group into sticking together and to support the work that we do. And so the Utility Protection Coalition, they could do public pressure campaigns. They could write, articles and do other public pressure things. Whereas us as interveners, once we intervene in a case, then we can't discuss the particulars in public. So it's always good to have those who are not interveners involved in making sure that the public is aware that comments that we can't make are being addressed. So that, Sandy, you have any other things to add to that?
Well, I mean, I will add that after the hearing, our work is not over. So after the Public Service Commission makes a decision, so they usually don't approve the full increase that the utility has requested. They might split the difference, or maybe if we're lucky, a little less, or they might be a little bit more than half of what they requested. Depends on the case. And then after the case, we are part of a collaborative with the Ameren and Spire cases, so that we meet with the utility and any other parties to the request, and we'll keep an eye on those programs for low and moderate income customers. And we look at, okay, how are they working? Is the money getting to the customers? That's one that we're really focusing on. This money's been set aside, but is it actually getting to the people who need the help? Are the programs designed properly? If the community action agencies are processing the customer assistance applications, what do they need in order to be more effective? So those discussions continue until the next rate case. And then there'll be a new collaborative after that. But I do want to just tell you a little bit about some of the accomplishments that we've been able to get over the past year. And again, we don't do this work by ourselves. So the Office of Public Counsel, they're instrumental in anything that's before the Public Service Commission. Legal Services of Missouri is also often involved. The Sierra Club might be involved, and an organization called Renew Missouri that focuses on renewable energy for Missouri. They may be involved too. But for example, the Spire case, we were able to get shareholder contributions to one of their programs in the amount of an additional $1 million, bringing the total amount of that customer assistance program to $3.3 million. And that case also included the pilot program, where eligibility was expanded to 300% of the federal poverty level. And I saw in the chat someone asked who's eligible for those pilot programs. In a situation like that, it would be all Spire East customers. So anyone who lives within the Spire East service area. And Ameren was able to get the 7% increase, but the Keeping Current and Keeping Cool budget, customer assistance program budget, increased to $4.25 million. And again, that was 50% from customers and 50% from the company. So we're really trying to focus on getting the company to pay as much as we can manage for these customer assistance programs, and not having the ratepayers pay for them. And Ameren also agreed to meet to discuss methods for legally reducing disconnections in zip codes with the highest percentage of customers who are involuntarily disconnected. And we think this is really important too, because this targeted work, looking at the zip codes, looking at the neighborhoods where there are higher rates of disconnections and getting assistance to those neighborhoods, we think is really important. And the other thing, going back to public participation and how important it is, with the recent MSD hearings, they had at least 10 hearings all across the St. Louis metropolitan area. And I sent out emails letting people know where they were, when they were coming up. I testified at one in Chesterfield. I was the only one there. But after my testimony, which really focused on expanding their customer assistance program, the director of finance came up to me and wanted to meet. And so we have been meeting with him. And I also testified, as did John Kaufman, our attorney, I testified at the last hearing. He testified at the trustee meeting after that. And the MSD Rate Commission has made customer assistance programs a very important part of their recommendation. So our voices are so important. And at that last hearing, after I testified and after the hearing was over, one of the commissioners came up to me and said, "Where has everybody been?" So this is the problem. If no one shows up and no one speaks out, they think that no one cares. And we were able to get a few of our community advisory members to that hearing. And Jackie has done a great job we give free testimony trainings for people who are interested in testifying. And she has done just an amazing job of explaining, you don't have to be an expert on utility rates. You only have to be an expert on your own experience. And so when people get up at those hearings, when they testify and tell their personal story, it's really meaningful. But if no one shows up, then they can just say, well, nobody cares,
And just one of the things about Metropolitan Sewer District is that it is not regulated by the Public Service Commission. So it's a different system. And so we had not been, over the years, really, they didn't have a process where they had public hearings and people could come out to speak. And so, this is one of the years where we felt like we really needed to get involved with the Metropolitan Sewer District hearing. And also it's a little more difficult because a lot of people who are renters don't see how it impacts them, or we don't pay a sewer bill, so part of the education is you may not think you pay a sewer bill, but if the cost goes up, your rent will follow that. And so it may not be a direct payment to Metropolitan Sewer District, but it will impact the amount that you are paying for rent, because that cost is going to be passed on to you. So that education, help to let people understand that they also need to be concerned about it, even if they don't have that bill in hand.
And
So I want to talk a little bit more about Sandy mentioned the collaboratives that we have to work with the utilities after the rate case. And this is something that we didn't always ask for. Those collaboratives were formed out of our frustration that the utility companies would say, okay, we're going to have this program, and then sort of not tell anybody about it. And at the end of the year, they'd say, well, nobody applied for it. And so we began to ask for, and Consumers Council in particular asked for a collaborative to be set up to determine how those programs were going to be implemented, and to sort of monitor, to have some way of monitoring that the funds were being utilized. And so that's been very impactful, because we have a seat at the table even after the rate case is over, to make sure that not only did they allocate funds, but that they have the right partnerships, the right vehicles to make sure that those funds get out to the public. And it's a very difficult task, because they don't really want to share all the information with us, and they have their own ideas about how they want to implement things. And so we have to, sit at the table and listen very carefully and make sure that that they know that, they have a responsibility to be responsive to us, because we are representing those folk who are in need of the services.
So I wonder if we should, I don't know, how much time are we setting aside at the end for questions, Karen?
We were thinking 15, 20 minutes, something like that, 15 minutes.
Okay.
You have time to talk about the bank?
Yeah, I was going to say, we'll speed through the banking. So we are a member of an organization called SLECRA, which is the St. Louis Equal Housing and Community Reinvestment Alliance. And our group, whenever a local or regional bank is up for their exam under the Community Reinvestment Act, we look at their lending practices and we try to figure out, are they lending to the neighborhoods where their branches are located? And what's really interesting to me about this, and this was one of my first meetings when I joined Consumers Council, and I was told to come to this meeting with a bank in St. Louis, and we showed up, and we have maps that show their lending patterns. So during the meeting, we talked to them, just basic conversation, and covered the fundamentals, and then we showed them the map. And at that point, you can see the bank president turning red all the way up, and his vice president tapping his foot pretty heavily. And so what we do is we say, okay, here are the facts. This is what's going on, and they can't argue with it. And so then we'll say, all right, well, this is what we're doing, and we're going to write a letter that's critical of your practices, and we're going to point this out. But we also want to give you an option to enter into a community benefits agreement. So give you an option to make some commitments to changing your practices. And so that is where this group has just been extraordinarily successful. And I'll let Jackie talk some more about this, because she's been involved in this work forever. But I'm just amazed. And the outcome is, not only is it good for the community, but it's good for the banks. The banks end up making more money. So it's good for the region overall. Jackie, you want to?
Yeah,
I know you have something you want to add.
Yes, I do.
More than something.
We started doing this work back around 2011, 2012. And at the very beginning, banks were resistant to even talk to us. So we'd send a letter and say, we want to discuss your lending practices. And some banks just ignored us. They didn't respond at all. A few banks, came to meet with us and were quite embarrassed as to, the maps that show that they had no lending, even though they have a branch in a neighborhood, but they have a complete assessment area. So their assessment area could include, all of St. Louis City, all of St. Louis County, yet their lending is, all West County, all South County, no lending in the city of St. Louis. And so for those banks who would talk to us, we asked them to enter into a benefits agreement and to let us help them provide better services in low-income communities and communities of color. Now, we were not asking them to loan money to people who weren't, qualified to get those loans. But the data that we had showed that, people at the same income level in North St. Louis and the same credit scores were being denied loans at, 3-to-1 ratio. They've been denied loans. So they applied for a loan and were denied. And a person in South County with that same credit score and income and would be approved for those loans. And so the banks who just totally disregarded us, we filed Justice Department complaints, HUD complaints, and fair housing complaints, and Justice Department discrimination complaints, and that brought them to the table to negotiate benefits agreements reluctantly with us. Now, some of them said, we're going to change our ugly ways, and they did. They made efforts, and in our benefits agreements, we asked for things like bank branches in neighborhoods that had more payday loans, stores than anything, and so we got banks to put 2 or 3 to commit to putting and to put those banks in partnership with trusted organizations. So one of the things that I wanted was a bank on Martin Luther King, because there's no bank from the county line to downtown, right in the center of the African American community. There's no bank, and so we did get a bank on Martin Luther King. We got a bank in Pagedale that had no bank ever in that city, and some other North County areas and city areas. But we got them to commit to investments in those communities, not only mortgage loans, but partnering with redevelopment companies that were in those areas, and putting money into nonprofits that were trying to do redevelopment in those areas, and supporting Justine Peterson, which is an organization that does small business lending to assist them with small business lending. And so, we really have made our community a better place to have a relationship with a bank. It's not perfect yet, because we're still reviewing those banks, and some of them still haven't made it. But there are more banks that come to us now when they're up for review, or when they're trying to merge, to say, okay, let's sit down and talk about how we can do things better than we had 10 or 12 years ago. So our relationship has become less adversarial and more partnership with the financial institutions.
And again, this is something that I was not familiar with at all. But if you think about it, who do you want to do business with? I mean, if you have gotten a mortgage on your house, chances are pretty good it was through a friend of a friend of your real estate agent, someone you know. And when the banks have a branch in a community, but they don't have any people of color working in their banks, people don't feel comfortable in those banks. And so they're not going to do business with them. Recently, I went to the opening of, it's called R&R Plaza in the Delwood area. And Midwest Bank Center has opened a branch there. And I now realize the importance of that. That would not have meant that much to me years ago. But now, knowing that apparently there are 35 payday loan lenders in the vicinity, and you could see a payday loan office from the front walkway of the bank. And so unfortunately, people are going to these payday loan centers where they're paying a lot more and being taken advantage of, because that's where they feel comfortable. And that's where they've been habitually doing their, quote unquote banking. But what we're hoping through SLECRA is that more people who are what we've called unbanked now become banked. And the banks also create products that are intended for people who are low to moderate income. So I know we're a little bit over our time if we want to have 15 minutes for questions. So do you want to start with the questions?
Yeah.
So let's see, the first one comes from Karen. Can you estimate the number of consumers that you have assisted?
So I'd like to say that every utility customer, whether they are low income or not, benefits from our work. And so, you benefit from lower rates, as well as, the low income folk who we're advocating for extra programs. And so it's hard to put a number on it, but I venture to say every Ameren, every Spire, every American Water customer has benefited from the work that we do. Even if it's not directly related to them, they benefit. So it's really hard to say what the numbers are.
But and I would agree with that. I think there are about 2.4 million. I just looked at this, but don't quote me on this. I don't know if my memory is correct. Ameren customers. But the other thing is that the Evergy customers, there's not a consumers council on the west side of Missouri. We would like to do that work, but we're currently not funded for it. We just don't have the capacity. But our work influences the Public Service Commission's decisions, and those decisions affect rate proposals from utilities on the other side of the state. So I do think that what we do influences decisions that are made for Evergy customers also.
Yeah, and Sandy, you're absolutely right. And some of the work we do impacts like what's called the Chapter 13 rules. And those are rules that govern all of the utilities. So when we spend time negotiating for, things like utility companies to have to, come to your door before they cut you off, or policies around tree trimming and all of those things, they impact all of the utilities that operate under the Missouri Public Service Commission.
So does that mean you only work with customers inside the metro area, St. Louis Metro?
No, so we have, our grant is funded through the Missouri Foundation for Health. And so there we serve all of the people within their service area to some extent. We don't have the capacity to actually go out to all those areas and do as much work as we do in the local area. But technically we serve all of the area that Missouri Foundation for Health covers.
Which is basically the east side of the state from the north to the south.
Okay. We have one more question from Karen. And how do you get people to testify?
So, yeah, that's really difficult. We go out to community meetings and meet with organizations, and particularly the already organized community groups that are made up of residents in that particular community. We go out and speak to them and ask them to be a part of our advisory committee. You don't have to be a part of our advisory committee to stand up and speak. But we also do the training for organizations that are serving in those communities, and just talk about it to as many people as we can about the importance of doing that.
Ruth has a couple of questions. Where are the pilot programs operating?
So
We'll start.
Yeah, when we ask for a pilot program, it covers the entire service area of that utility. And so, for example, the Keeping Current and the Keeping Cool programs, which are Ameren funded programs, they operate in every county where they provide utility assistance to.
And what % of folks who are eligible for LIHEAP actually receive it?
Oh,
That's a good
that's a
question.
number that before I retired, I would have known. But
Right.
it was when I ran a LIHEAP program, it was probably 30%. It was 30 to 34% of people who are eligible actually receive it. And during those days, there was never enough money to provide assistance. And so the programs ran out of money. Most recently, during COVID, they got a lot of extra money and money wasn't an option, but people who had not been eligible before, it was hard to convince them that, you can get some assistance. And I don't think that there was enough outreach to those new people who were new to needing assistance and were off work because of COVID and that kind of thing. It was much harder to reach them. So we did a lot of collaboration with organizations to try to get the word out.
And there's a LIHEAP deadline that everybody should know about. September 30th is the last day you can apply for LIHEAP to cover this past year's bills. So if you know of anyone who needs energy assistance or ESIP, which is, what does that stand for again? The
Energy Crisis Intervention Program.
Exactly. Those funds, you have to apply by September 30th. And after September 30th, the funding for LIHEAP is cut in half, right, Jackie? For
Yes.
the next year. So there are going to be less funds available. And we don't feel like the state is really advertising that. So, again, we've put that on our Facebook page. I've sent it out in an email. I'm hoping that people who can encourage people who need the help to apply, can get them to do that. But yeah.
And as far as the money, is there a difference between the city and the county?
Difference. So the LIHEAP funds are allocated based on the percentage of poverty that an organization that a service area has. And so the community action agencies, the state looks at, what is 100% of poverty and what percentage of that 100% does each organization have, and that's the way the money is distributed to, to those various areas.
All right. And Ellie would like to know, how can we help you get the word out and take action?
Oh my gosh. Sign up for our emails. Go to our Facebook page. Attend our fundraiser. I'm putting a link in the chat to our fundraiser. And we are happy to come out and talk to your group about the work that we do. Just any, I think, networking, word of mouth. I think that the work we do is kind of wonky in some ways. So it's something that sometimes people have a hard time understanding. But what I found is that when we do make our message clear, and hopefully Jackie and I have done a good job of this, it seems like our presentations usually go very, very well. People get it and they say, oh my gosh, like this is really important. I mean, you think if you live in a house or you rent a place, you have to pay utilities.
Mm-hmm.
So this utility work affects everybody, and the banking work affects everybody too. I mean, it not only enables people to get loans, but it benefits the community as people are able to increase their own wealth through being banked.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I saw a question about how are we funded, and I just wanted to make it clear that we don't get any federal funds. We don't take any money from the utilities. And that's because we need to be an independent voice. And so we are fundraising all the time. We are, happy enough to have a grant from Missouri Foundation for Health because they understand the impact that we're having on the health and safety of families. And so we get those funds, but we have to have matching funds and all of that. So we're in a constant state of, how do we get more funds so that we can do more more good work. And and so, certainly donating would help. But we also, as Sandy said, we need folk who can get the word out.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was thinking you were funded just from the grant, so I skipped that one. But
No, we
Ruth,
wish we
yeah,
had enough, but yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
I'm glad you answered
so,
that.
so for example, this year we had all 4 utilities come in for rate increases at the same time. We could have used another body to just help us keep up with stuff and keep organized and all of that.
I bet.
Join the UPC if you'd like to have more information on how you can join that group. We meet once a month on I think is it the first Monday?
First Monday at 10
First
a.m.
Monday
Mhm.
at 10
Yeah.
a.m. And Sandy can send you more information.
I'll
That's
put my
a
email
place
address.
where you can, keep up with what we're doing and also what our other partner organizations are doing. And if there's an action that we need you to take, you would find out about it there. And even if you can't attend all the meetings, just getting on their mailing list would be another place where you could get information about what we do. But more than that, talk to your church members, your neighbors, talk about utilities, because a lot of seniors are reluctant to talk about it. And when we first started the utility assistance programs back in in the late 70s, we had to count on the churches. We sent staff to every church that would let us in on a Wednesday night, on a Sunday morning. We'd have staff there because the churches were the most trusted places that could reach the most people. And so to talk about utility assistance needs and to reach those folk who don't think that they qualify for anything, and make sure that if you're living on a retirement income from the state of Missouri or a teacher's retirement income, and you're in a house that you've been in for a lot of years and need weatherization and all of those things, that there may be some assistance that that people are available for, but they've sort of disqualified themselves and said, well, I can't get any of that. And so to begin to have that conversation in places where you think people are doing perfectly fine. One of the things that, no,
go on.
I was going off on a tangent, but one of the things that we found during the heat wave was that, and this was back in the 80s when people were dying in their homes and had air conditioning. And the ones, some of the elderly that we talked to said they wouldn't turn their air conditioners on because they were afraid to get really high bills. And so people will quietly do without things to make ends meet. They were more afraid of getting a bill they couldn't pay than they were of dying from the heat. So just having those conversations,
That's good to know.
People know that there are funds available. The Keeping Cool program does not have the same guidelines as the LIHEAP program.
So Ruth, you had a question?
I'm going to combine the last two questions. Do you have a lending map that's available, or are the lending maps available for the banks? And is there a bank that's doing a better job, or banks doing a better job for lending?
Yeah. So I think that the lending maps, there may be some on Sleekra, but they're produced by NCRC, the National Consumer Reinvestment Coalition, and we could probably get those maps if there, but there may be some. I'll have to check that out to see. And
I can ask Glenn.
yeah. And in terms of banks that are doing better than others, I think my my favorite banks, but there are lots of them, are Simmons Bank and Midwest Bank Center and Montgomery Bank. Can you think of some others, Sandy? I can't think of those. Those are my favorites.
Those are
And Midwest Bank Center is,
maybe Carrollton too.
oh, Carrollton Bank for sure. Carrollton Bank. Midwest Bank Center is one of my favorites because before they merged and became Midwest Bank Center, when we filed the Justice Department complaint against them. And at the end of it, they came to the table and they said, we understand the error of our ways. They were one of the banks that would not talk to us. And they committed to working with us and have done just an excellent job in getting into the community. They when they built the bank inside Friendly Temple Church inside that community center, they rented a part of that and built the bank there. And before the bank opened, they had all of the businesses in that community had committed to moving their accounts to that bank. And they thought it was going to be 5 years before they broke even. And within the first year, they were profitable in that neighborhood. So, those kinds of things, they really reached out in the community, went door to door and talked to people and did all of the right things. So, yeah.
Ruth, you
been
had another question?
Oh, well, actually, I was going to add on to what Jackie was saying about, folks not being aware that they're eligible. I've been doing work with very low income seniors, like people who get between $800 and $1,000, SSI or Social Security a month, and they are most generally not in good health. They're not physically fit. They're not technically savvy. So doing something online, unloading documents, uploading documents, kind of beyond them. And when we advise them that they need to go to one location in the city, which is across the city and will mean multiple bus changes, it's a deal breaker.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out how to mitigate that.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. So the one of the things that Spire and Ameren are doing sort of collectively is trying to get into communities with energy assistance events. And we've put on a couple of those events. We had one a couple of weeks ago where we were expecting about 30 people to show up, and had over 80 people who actually showed up to apply for assistance. And so if you have a community center where seniors go to in your area or somewhere, we can set up an event that would bring the right people to do the applications there, because we recognize that it really is a problem. And having those trusted partners to host those events means that you will get more seniors to come out to those events.
That's helpful. That's helpful. I'll think about that.
Okay.
Yeah, they're really successful, and the utilities are very eager to participate. I mean, even so far as driving to, where was it, Cape Girardeau or Joplin on a weekend to do a community meeting that Renew Missouri wanted to put together. So I'm impressed, and they work their tails off when they get there. So yeah, these meetings have been really important and a great way to spend down some of the money that's available. Okay.
Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much, Sandy and Jackie. We really we have Now it recorded on YouTube, and so others can certainly see this as well. And you all are doing great work.
Thank you.
you.
Thanks so
Thank
much for
you.
giving us the
Thank you.
opportunity to present. And please consider attending our fundraiser or going to our website and making a donation. We would love your support.
Okay. Well, thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.